Hey, this is Coach Woolley, the Holistic Trainer, and this video is a demonstration of a few different movements that might just save your life. In this video, we are going to review different exercises you can do to lower your risk of fall-related injuries. Every 19 minutes, an older American dies from a fall or the risks associated with a fall. It is one of the most common occurrences that cause death for older Americans. And falling is one of those things that's undiagnosable and it's not well discussed in the medical industry, outside of the fact of just maintain your balance. Now, balance is absolutely key, and our number one objective should be not having a fall occur in the first place. And that's where proper physical training, good nutrition, good sleep, proper footwear can all make a huge difference. But the fact of the matter is that no matter how prepared we are, there is always a good chance that an unintentional fall may occur. And this can come from a number of different situations. Maybe you're stepping off the curb and you don't quite land right. Maybe you're walking down the stairs and there's something in the way and you slip over it. Maybe you're just doing your normal thing, walking through the grocery store, as I've had clients happen before, and you have a fall. So what we want to focus on is falling appropriately. Yes, there is an optimal and a suboptimal way of falling, and now we're going to review different exercises that you can do to help massively lower your risk. Because here's the deal, falling is a skill. And if you train your mind and your body about how to respond appropriately in a given situation, like a fall, if you've trained this before, you are better prepared and your risk of a fall-related injury massively drops. This happens all the time. People are fairly healthy, they're getting by in life, but they're a little bit older, and then they have a fall and a major injury occurs. Maybe it's a shoulder, a hip, possibly a head injury, and you end up in the hospital. And as I said earlier, every 19 minutes in America, an older adult dies from a fall or the fall-related injury. So maybe there's a chance where if you fall, you hit your head and unfortunately you die on the scene. But maybe you don't die there and you're rushed to the hospital, and in the hospital, your overnight stays turn into overnight weeks, possibly turns into another condition like pneumonia, and unfortunately you pass. And this happens all the time. So now we're going to talk about how you can massively lower the risk and the chances of this happening to you. So when people fall, it's normally an automatic reaction that people have to reach their hands out. And this is just a natural human reaction to want to try to brace yourselves. But that comes with massive risks. If I just reach my arms out, there's not a good chance that I'm going to be able to stabilize my body. And that means my shoulders might get affected, and I may even land in a way where my head hits the ground really hard. So the way you're going to start by lowering this risk is practicing these 3 movements in the comfort of your own bed. That's right. You don't even have to leave your house. You don't have to find an area where you have soft mats to do this, although I recommend that, and we're going to cover that here in a moment. Now, the way we're going to practice this is we're going to assume that there are three primary ways that a fall is going to happen. We're normally either going to fall forward, to the side, or backwards. So we're going to cover the 3 different ways that falls happen and the way to properly prepare your body to lower the risk of injuries. So the first one is if I'm falling forward. Now, if I fall forward, most of the time what happens is people will just reach their arms out. And as I said, that's better than just falling flat on your face, which is why a little tip I have is try to avoid walking with your hands in your pockets if you're at a higher risk of falls, because you need your arms at the ready just in case something happens. But if I fall forward from a standing position and I land on outreached arms, most people are not strong enough to brace themselves. So what happens is we get massive amounts of impact stress running up through the arm and into the shoulder. And it's very easy to break a wrist, break a shoulder, and then again, Maybe I'm not strong enough, and when I land, I hit my head on the ground. These are things we want to avoid at all costs. So a more appropriate way to fall is if I'm falling forward, I want to try to land across my entire forearm, like so. So I'm falling forward, and I land on my elbows and my wrists simultaneously. The reason this is better is because when I land on my entire forearm, that's a much bigger surface area, and I'm landing with the impact horizontally through that forearm rather than vertically. That's going to put it's going to lessen the load running up through the body because the weight is more evenly distributed. On top of that, the risks of this is much lower than the risks of an outstretched hand. It's going to be a much lower risk of shoulder and wrist injury when I land on my forearms than if I land with outstretched arms. This is also going to help lower the risk of me hitting my head on the concrete because of that impact management. Here, it's much easier to keep my head up than if I land here. It's harder to slow the way down. Now, that still carries with it risks. Obviously, that forearm's going to be banged up. We're definitely going to rip some of the skin on our forearm, possibly a risk of fracture, but the risk is much lower on this part of my arm than landing on my outstretched full arm onto my hands. Another way that's very common of falling is slipping directly backwards. Now, most people's instant reaction is when they're falling backwards, they fall into their hands like so. So I'm falling, and I reach my hands back. That, very similarly to the front way falling, is not an appropriate way to fall. It's suboptimal. Because when I land like this, I'm putting a lot of stress up through my shoulders. There's a lot of impact going into that shoulder. There's a much higher risk of fracturing my shoulder, dislocating my shoulder if I land like so. And when that fracture happens, that dislocation happens, there's a greater chance that my arm will slip out and I'll fall onto my head. So a much better way to fall is if I'm falling backwards, my instant reaction is to stretch my arms out to the side and hit both arms into the ground. I'm falling, my arms go out, and I hit the ground. Another cue you'll notice, and I didn't mention this on the forward falling, but I want to keep my head up. When I fall forward, my head's up. When I fall backwards, I tuck my chin to my chest. And that lowers the risk of my head falling back and hitting the ground behind me. So I'm falling, my arms go out. I want to hit my arms at the ground simultaneously with my back. My chin is to my chest, here. That, as well, carries with it risks. We're hitting those forearms, it's not going to feel good. We're hitting our back, it's not going to feel good. But the risk of that falling in that manner is much lower than if I fall like this with my hands outstretched. There's a much greater risk of injury and a higher risk of my arm slipping out and my head falling back and hitting the ground. Like so. Now, the other direction that we may fall would be falling to the side in either direction, where I slip to the side and it's not quite forward, it's not quite backward. So this one's a little bit different. It carries with it elements of the one that we just did, in which if I'm falling to the side, I again want to reach my arm out, because the normal instinct is to reach my hand out for the ground to brace myself. It's a much better idea and safer idea to reach my entire arm out to distribute that load across my entire arm. So as I fall, I want to try to fall onto my shoulder and onto my outstretched arm like so. Again, you'll notice the position of my head. I'm keeping my head away from the ground to lower the risk of a head injury. I'm falling to the side, I reach my arm out, hit the ground. Head up. It's not going to feel good. We're hitting concrete or some sort of hard surface. I'm going to get scrapes, possibly minor fractures. But the risk of that is much lower than if I fall on that outstretched hand for the same reasons we've already covered. The load placed through my arm here, the impact, much higher risk of wrist injury, elbow injury, shoulder injury. And if that happens during that fall, when I try to brace myself, there's a greater chance that my arm will slip out and then cause the thing we want to avoid the most, which is a head injury. So those right there are 3 great ways to practice reducing the risk of falling by having that skill set. Remember, falling, it's an art. There's an art to falling in a more appropriate way. So let's do a quick review, because these are exercises you can do in your bed, or if you have fitness or yoga mats at home, or a very soft carpet, or even pillows on the ground. You start by doing it on the ground, and then we'll progress to doing it from a standing position. So you want to practice falling forward, starting on your knees, or even standing up next to your bed, and you fall onto your forearms, keeping your head up. Like so. One additional cue you want to do with all of them is brace your abdominals. So you want to tighten your core. Even better is to pull your navel in to engage the deeper core stabilizing muscles. But that's something that you have to train, because again, what we're trying to do here is make the body have an instinct of falling in a particular manner rather than not having that skill set and our normal reaction being suboptimal. That's why you need to practice this. So as I fall, I hit both forearms, I brace, and if you can, try practicing making a grunting sound to further increase the abdominal pressure. Okay, we're practicing falling forward, landing on the elbows. Come back up. Take a few breaths. You want to do this multiple times. Falling onto the forearms, try bracing your stomach and exhaling as you land. Like so. Really focus on keeping that head up. Then you want to sit at the edge of your bed or start standing next to your bed and fall backwards and stretch your arms out, keeping them straight, hitting your hands against the bed or the ground simultaneously. Tucking the chin, making that sound out to increase abdominal pressure. I'm falling backwards. Come back up, take a few breaths, do the rest of your repetitions. And then lastly, practice falling to the side, both directions. So for this one, again, you can kind of sit at the edge of your bed or start standing next to the edge of your bed. And you want to fall to one side, reaching your arm out, keeping your head up, doing the brace, and exhaling. Come back up, practice at the other side. And you want to do this multiple times. I don't have a specific number of reps you should do, but I would make it a daily practice, especially if you're just getting started and if you know your risks of falling are high, or maybe you've had a fall in the recent past. You need to practice this every day so it becomes ingrained into your brain, because this isn't something you can just think about doing when you're falling. When you're falling, there's no time to think. There's only time to respond or react. And we want to have an appropriate response by practicing these skill sets, so when we have that moment, we can catch ourselves appropriately. Now, the next way to get even better at the skill, but it has to be done safely, is doing it from a standing position, because this is much more close to real life, because most of us fall from a standing position. But you need to have a soft surface to do this on. I have these nice martial art mats to fall on. If you're going to do it at home, you need to have a very soft surface. A bunch of blankets, a bunch of towels, fitness mats, make the ground very soft, because you don't want to have a hard impact when you fall, because you're going to do it multiple times. But I really recommend that. This is something that, again, might save your life if you do it. Now, to do it from a standing position, nothing changes. From the forward position, you fall forward, land on your forearms, land with your abdominals engaged, You can try lowering your center of gravity so it's not as far of a fall. Don't try standing all the way up and falling forward. Get a little lower so you're closer to the ground. Coming back up. Land on the forearms, abs tight. Make that exhale as you land. Lower your center of gravity and fall forward. You see that I have my legs straight. If you can't do it, you don't have the strength, it's still going to be better to land with your knees and your forearms simultaneously. The risk of this injury is far lower than if I just fall flat on my face or with my hands outstretched. Now when I'm falling backwards, same cues for falling backwards. I'm standing up straight. I'm going to lower my center of gravity. And as I fall, I'm going to reach my arms out and hit them at the ground simultaneously, rolling back. Lower, lower. Get ready. Rolling to your backside. Notice I'm almost in a curling position, hitting the ground. And then lastly, falling to the side. I'm standing upright. I'm going to reach my arm out to the side, falling on the side of my body with my head off of the floor. And then you'll practice this on both sides. Now, I think most of the value is going to come specifically from just practicing it near your bed. That's where you're going to get the majority of the benefit. It's a much lower impact, soft landing, and you can do a lot of repetitions. This is something you want to do 10, 15, 20 reps at a time, because the more repetitions you're doing, the better your brain is learning. In this scenario, this is what's going to happen. In this scenario, this is what's going to happen. And as you ingrain that into your brain, that becomes your normal response. And hey, hopefully it never happens. That's my hope. That you do the physical training, you take care of your health to the point where your risk of falling is fairly low and a fall never happens to you. But there's some things in life that we can't prevent. We can't prevent falls, we can just lower the risk. So it's a great idea to have the skill set that if it's needed, when you fall, you don't get seriously hurt. So this is how to fall appropriately. If you like this video, please share it with people you love, who you want to have a lower risk of falling. Give it a like. Comment when you practice it. Comment. Let me know what you think about it. And let's lower those risks of falls.